The Price of Dignity. Chapter 1. The heat inside the warehouse was stifling, even in the early hours of the morning. Mike could already feel sweat dripping down his back as he organized the inventory for the day's shipments. It was mindless, repetitive work, exactly what he had been doing for the past decade. A decade of wasting away, inhaling dust while the best years of his life ticked by. Mike slammed a box down in frustration. He was sick of being stuck in this dead-end job. His wife Cheryl didn't say it anymore, but he knew she had always hoped for more. More pay, more prestige. The kind of stable office job where Mike could provide a better life for them. But with only a high school diploma and few prospects, the warehouse had been Mike's fate. The rumble of the supply line machinery starting up shook Mike from his brooding. It was time to distribute the packages that would soon be on their way to customers people Mike envied for having cleaner, cooler, more respected jobs. The packages seemed to mock Mike as they traveled past him on the conveyor belt. Each one a reminder that he was trapped in a decaying blue-collar life that left him longing for achievement and dignity. Mike sighed and followed the procession of boxes. 10 tedious hours until the day shift arrived, and he could clock out having accomplished nothing except wasting time and descend another day closer to the grave. How many more until retirement, if that day ever came? The packages on the belt blurred together, a parade of Mike's wasted potential. Chapter 2. Mike Jensen, please report to the manager's office immediately. Mike looked up in surprise from the conveyor belt he was monitoring. Being called to the office was never a good sign, but he couldn't recall any recent incidents or complaints that would warrant disciplinary action. Apprehensively, Mike made his way past the warehouse racks and through the back hallways leading to corporate. The air conditioning blasted him as he opened the door to the office area, a welcome reprieve from the stifling heat of the warehouse. He felt self-conscious entering the pristine workspace in his grimy blue jumpsuit. The office staff eyed him curiously, no doubt surprised to see a warehouse worker summoned among their cubicles. Mike's work boots clomped loudly across the plush carpeting, echoing off the walls of this alien white-collar world. After asking for directions, Mike found the manager's office. He took a deep breath before opening the door, bracing himself for whatever complaint or infraction awaited him. Instead, the manager, a slender bald man in an expensive-looking suit, smiled and welcomed Mike to have a seat. "No need to look so worried," the manager said reassuringly. "I've called you here today for good news. We're offering you a promotion to an office position in logistics coordination." Mike could hardly believe what he was hearing. Him a promotion? After years of languishing in the dusty drudgery of the warehouse, could he finally escape to the prestige of an office posting? "I'll admit I was starting to lose hope after so long in the warehouse," Mike said. "What brought this on?" The manager nodded sympathetically. "Your 10 years of diligent service has not gone unnoticed, and quite frankly, you're overdue to have your talents better utilized. The logistics team could benefit from someone with your on-site knowledge and experience with our systems." Mike left the office in numb disbelief, barely noticing the refreshing cool air as he drifted back to the warehouse. A promotion. A way out of the dead end he had been stuck in for a decade. A chance at a better life for him and his wife. As Mike looked out at the warehouse that had caged him for so long, he finally saw a glimmer of hope for the future he had dreamed of. Chapter 3. Mike's excitement about starting his new office job quickly soured once he met his new manager, Bill. A petty tyrant in his late 40s, Bill had been put in charge of the logistics team. Despite having no practical experience in the warehouse operations he was now overseeing. He had been hired straight into a management role based on his background in sales, and immediately took to lording his authority over his subordinates. On Mike's first day, Bill laid out his vision for the team. "I'm going to shake things up around here," he proclaimed. "No more laziness or warehouse mentality. I expect 100% commitment to excellence from each of you." Mike bristled at the insinuation that warehouse workers were inherently lazy. But he held his tongue, not wanting to jeopardize his long-awaited promotion on the first day. Over the next several weeks, however, it became apparent that Bill harbored a particular prejudice against Mike as a former warehouse worker. Despite Mike's extensive knowledge of the inventory systems and logistics processes, Bill dismissed his input and refused to assign him to critical projects. Instead, Mike was given only basic data entry tasks, well below his level of experience. At a staff meeting, Bill assigned a major supply chain analysis project to Greg and Stacy, two of the office workers who lacked Mike's insights into the daily warehouse operations. "I need my best and brightest on this one," Bill said. "We'll show those warehouse grunts how it's done from the office side." The dig was clearly aimed at Mike, who seethed silently as the other office workers smirked. After the meeting, Bill pulled Mike aside. "I know you came over from the warehouse side," Bill said, shaking his head patronizingly. "So you still have a lot to learn about how we do things here. Just stick to the basic assignments I give you for now." Mike had endured a lifetime of disrespect as a warehouse worker. Now, just as he had escaped to the office, his competence was being questioned by this pompous manager. As Mike swallowed his anger, he resolved not to let Bill belittle him. The battle lines were drawn between the weary warehouse veteran and the office tyrant. Chapter 4. That weekend, Mike went back to the warehouse, not to work but to attend the retirement party for Georgie, an older worker who had toiled beside Mike for years. The warehouse break room was festively decorated, and all of Mike's former colleagues had turned out to celebrate the occasion. "Mike, good to see you, kid," Georgie said, greeting Mike with a warm handshake. "How's that new office job treating you?" "It has its ups and downs," Mike said diplomatically. "Well, we sure do miss you out here," Georgie said. "Ain't no one who knows the systems as well as you, right, fellas?" The other warehouse workers chimed in with agreement and praise for Mike's expertise. He had earned their respect through years of camaraderie and proving his dedication time and again. "We know you'll show those office bigwigs how it's done," one of the workers said. The others laughed and raised their beers in salute. Mike was touched by their faith in him. The warehouse crew had been like an extended family, always having each other's backs. He realized that they were his true allies at the company, not the office workers, and certainly not his tyrannical boss Bill. "I appreciate the support," Mike told his colleagues. "I may have moved to the office side, but I'll never forget where I came from. You guys are the real backbone of this company." The warehouse workers had greeted Mike's promotion as a victory for one of their own, making it to the coveted office level. Now, knowing they still had his back filled Mike with confidence he had been lacking since starting the new position. With their support, he knew he could endure whatever schemes Bill tried to undermine him. The loyalty of his warehouse allies would give Mike the strength to stand up against the office tyrant. Chapter 5. A few weeks later, Mike was called into a meeting with Bill and the head of HR. Mike took his seat across from the two men, wondering if this was yet another attempt by Bill to criticize his performance. "Now, Mike," Bill began in somber tone, "I asked you here today because I'm concerned about the interactions between the two of us. I know making the transition from the warehouse hasn't been easy, but I want you to know that I'm here to support you." This charitable posture surprised Mike, given Bill's past belittlement of him. Before Mike could respond, Bill continued. In retrospect, I see I may have come on too strong when you first joined us, Bill said. I want us to start fresh. My door is always open if you have any questions or need guidance transitioning into your new role. Bill extended his hand in a show of reconciliation as the HR rep looked on approvingly. Mike cautiously shook Bill's hand, not fully trusting this new supportive demeanor. Over the next few days, Bill went out of his way to assign Mike more substantial projects and check in on his progress. He was all smiles and encouragement whenever they interacted. To the outside observer, it appeared a model manager-employee relationship. But having endured Bill's past hostility, Mike suspected this new charm offensive was just a facade. When Mike tried to voice his insights during team meetings, Bill would not politely but ultimately disregard his input. The juicy assignments still went to Bill's hand-picked office allies. One day, Mike stopped by Bill's office to ask for clarification on an assignment. Bill waved him off, saying he was too busy planning content for his YouTube channel. How to keep my fans happy, Bill chuckled. They just hit 100 subscribers, so I'm practically famous now. Mike realized with chilling clarity that Bill saw the office staff as actors in his delusional fantasy of internet celebrity, not as colleagues deserving of basic respect. His cheerfulness was conditional, a mask that split whenever his ego was threatened. Mike left Bill's office even more distrustful of his manager's motives. Bill was not an ally, but a cunning opponent scheming to undermine Mike and protect his own inflated sense of importance. Bill's facade of support was just another weapon to delegitimize Mike's rightful place in the office. Mike would need to stay sharp and vigilant, relying on his warehouse allies for solidarity against Bill's machinations. The office politics had turned into all-out war. Chapter 6. A few days later, the truth became painfully clear to Mike. As he was typing up a report, Stacy from the logistics team swung by his cubicle to chat. That new supply chain database you suggested in the meeting yesterday was such a great idea, she gushed. I can't believe Bill didn't want to move forward with it. You obviously know what you're talking about. Mike froze. What do you mean? Bill told me my proposal was rejected because of budget concerns. Stacy frowned. No, he told the team your idea wasn't fully formed, and that you should focus on smaller projects for the time being. Mike suddenly recalled other instances when Bill had undermined him to coworkers behind his back. He always played nice to Mike's face, but clearly didn't hesitate to sabotage him whenever possible. The fake ally had revealed his true colors. I see, Mike said slowly. Well, thanks for letting me know. After Stacy left, Mike leaned back in his chair, stewing in anger. So this was how Bill operated, all smiles in person, but trashing Mike's reputation whenever he wasn't in the room. Bill had only given him basic assignments because he wanted Mike to fail, protecting Bill's own status. Well, Mike resolved he wouldn't provide Bill the satisfaction. Going to HR seemed fruitless. Bill's charisma let him charm upper management. This was an underdog battle that Mike would have to fight and win on his own. From the start, Bill had arrogantly underestimated Mike, seeing him only as a warehouse lackey. But Mike knew this company and its operations inside and out. Armed with that knowledge, he would find a way to emerge victorious from this office feud. After so many years stuck in the warehouse, Mike finally had a chance to claim the prestige he deserved. He wouldn't let a two-faced snob like Bill take that away without a fight. An epic confrontation was brewing, and only one man would be left standing. Chapter 7. After the recent revelations about Bill's duplicity, Mike decided to carefully plan his next moves. He didn't want to be perceived as a disgruntled employee, so going to war with Bill openly was not an option. The battle would have to happen subtly and behind the scenes. Mike's warehouse experience made him a master of the inventory systems. He knew there were many small ways to clandestinely sabotage operations: misfiled paperwork, delayed orders, rerouted shipments. With his expertise, Mike could potentially cost Bill's department thousands in lost productivity and errors. But remaining above blame would take finesse. If Mike wasn't careful, it could easily blow back on him. He decided that the first step should be gathering intel so he could pinpoint vulnerabilities. Mike started mingling more frequently with the warehouse workers when dropping off paperwork. The conversations appeared casual to outside observers, but Mike was actually mining his colleagues for valuable inside information. "So how have the new supply requisitions been working out?" Mike would ask innocently. "Any hiccups with processing?" The warehouse workers obliged, providing him with the latest gossip on which procedures were problematic and where inventory errors were cropping up. Mike got a master class in the company's operational weak points priceless reconnaissance. His decoy maneuvers were also bearing fruit. Mike made sure to pepper his conversations with upper management about hypothetical problems, gauging their reactions to issues like shipment delays or data system glitches. He was learning what types of disruptions set off the biggest alarms. Slowly and methodically, Mike gathered his arsenal of dirty tricks and key data points. When the time was right, he could pull small, unseen strings that would make Bill's smooth operations unravel. A misfiled form here, a clerical error there. The death would be by 1,000 cuts. And when frustrated leadership turned to Bill for answers, Mike would humbly step up with his extensive knowledge to get things back on track. By the time anyone detected foul play, the damage to Bill's reputation would be done. Mike's patience in the warehouse had finally paid off with the chance to claim his due status in the office. Outmaneuvering Bill would require calculated vigilance and discipline. But Mike was determined to see his long-simmering desire for achievement become reality. For too long, he had been the underdog. Now he would be the agent of the overdog's downfall. Chapter 8. At first, Mike was able to discreetly sabotage operations and make Bill look incompetent without detection. But after a month of mysteriously misplaced files and delayed shipments, Bill started suspecting foul play. He began reviewing all paperwork himself and overseeing warehouse procedures personally. Mike could no longer inflict damage unnoticed. Frustrated but undeterred, Mike kept looking for vulnerabilities. The next time a major procedural overhaul was proposed, Mike saw his chance. He recommended keeping the old warehouse inventory system, feeding upper management complex jargon about integration issues. To Mike's satisfaction, his proposal was accepted over Bill's objections. But when the new initiative predictably became a chaotic mess, Bill seized the opportunity to lay blame. "I advised from the start that we needed to fully transition to the new system," Bill told the CEO. But certain individuals convinced leadership, otherwise warehouse staff, simply don't understand how we operate on this side. The CEO cast a disappointed look in Mike's direction. Mike's face burned as he realized Bill had outmaneuvered him politically. Later that day, Mike was called into Bill's office. "Have a seat, Mike," Bill said, leaning back with a smug grin. Despite his nonchalant pose, Mike could see cold fury simmering behind his eyes. "Your little games have to stop," Bill stated calmly. "Did you really think I wouldn't uncover your attempts to make me look bad?" Mike stammered denials, but Bill cut him off. "I don't know what they taught you in the warehouse, but we don't tolerate sabotage here, however. Bill leaned forward menacingly. I'm willing to give you one more chance since you're still new to this office, but no more conspiring behind my back. You report to me now, understood? Mike nodded silently, cowed by Bill's ferocity. Good. Then I'll see you bright and early Monday. Bill's threatening facade vanished, and he smiled cheerfully, as if they had merely discussed sports over beers. Mike stumbled from the office in defeat. All his clever maneuvers had only strengthened Bill's hand. Now stripped of his ability to strategize behind the scenes, Mike was like a cornered bulldog facing a ruthless game hunter. For the first time, Mike considered accepting defeat and begging for his old warehouse job back. At least the work there had been honest, free of lies and manipulation. But the thought of slinking back after coming so close to victory was too much humiliation to bear. Like it or not, this was Mike's arena now too. And an old warhorse like him didn't take lightly to defeat. The office game wasn't over yet. Bill had escalated, but so too would Mike. Only one man could rule this jungle. Chapter 9. After Bill's threats, Mike kept his head down at the office, not wanting to give him any ammunition for retaliation. Outside of work, however, Mike reconnected with his old warehouse allies to rebuild his morale. Mike joined the crew for drinks after their shift one Friday. Once again, he was astounded by their camaraderie and support. We know Bill's had it out for you from day one worker said sympathetically. Guy's got an ego the size of a hot air balloon, but he don't know who he's messing with going against you. Georgie bought another round. You've always been clearest thinker out of all of us, Georgie said, topping off Mike's glass. Just keep trusting your instincts. Kid bullies like Bill put on a tough act, but they're scared of anyone with real talent. The other men nodded and voiced their agreement. You know the systems and the operations inside out, another said. Use that to your advantage. Mike was hesitant to get into the dirty specifics, but he admitted morale had suffered under Bill's leadership. Say no more, Georgie said with an understanding wink. We didn't claw our way up from the loading docks by playing nice. Maybe it's time Mr. Bill learns what a tight operation you warehouse boys run. Heartened by this camaraderie, Mike felt his fighting spirit reignite. His allies were right. He knew this company down to the bolts, holding the shelving units together. Armed with that insider knowledge, he could still regain the upper hand over Bill. In the following weeks, Mike quietly collected any idle gossip and complaints floating around the warehouse. Thanks to his rapport with the workers, they funneled him a steady stream of dirt, misused budgets, safety hazards from rush procedures, hushed-up equipment malfunctions. Like a master spy, Mike pieced together scraps into patterns, slowly compiling a tapestry of negligence under Bill's supervision. An anonymous, well-timed phone call was all it would take for each threat to become a noose around Bill's neck. Mike knew he was playing with fire that could burn more than just Bill. But after a decade slogging in the warehouse, he refused to surrender his shot at advancement because of one pompous bully. The boardroom was just another battlefield. Time for this old dog to use some new tricks. With his reconnaissance complete, Mike prepared to tactfully leak findings through back channels. Let upper management untangle the web. Mike would just light the fuse. By keeping his hands clean publicly, there would be no proof of his involvement. And the dutiful worker routine ensured he remained above reproach. The setup was high risk, but Mike's warehouse allies had emboldened him. Together, they would remind Bill exactly who he had crossed. After years of servitude, it was time for a palace coup. Chapter 10. Mike decided the anonymous tip campaign against Bill could wait. An unexpected revelation altered his plans for vengeance. While gathering daily security footage as part of his responsibilities, Mike overheard laughter from the next office. He peeked through the doorway and saw the department assistant watching a video on her computer with her headphones on. Mike was about to move on when Bill's face flashed on the screen. Against his better judgment, Mike lingered, watching over the assistant's shoulder through the doorway. The video showed Bill clumsily attempting various stunts around the office in hopes of going viral. In one clip, he attempted to jump his rolling chair off a ramp, only to crash painfully on his back. Mike couldn't help but chuckle watching his arrogant boss' pathetic antics. But his amusement turned to shock as the video took a darker turn. The scene switched to surveillance footage from the warehouse floor, showing the workers laboring amid the boxes and machinery. Bill had obviously recorded the video on his phone without their knowledge. Here we have the warehouse drones in their natural habitat, Bill narrated in a mocking faux documentary tone. Notice the vacant, dim-witted expressions from a life of mindless drudgery. Mike's blood boiled watching Bill openly demean and ridicule the hard-working staff that had earned Mike's deepest respect. But the worst was still to come. The video showed footage of Mike working intently, unaware he was being recorded. "Appearing on your left is the king of the apes," Bill whispered gleefully. A legend in his own tiny mind, almost too dumb to realize I'm unfit to lick my boots. Mike watched in disgusted fury as Bill proceeded to make further degrading comments using unspeakable slurs. His hands trembled with the urge to strangle his smug face through the screen. Finally unable to take any more, Mike barged into the assistant's office, making her jump. "Where did you get that video?" he demanded. She cowered at his harsh tone. "I'm sorry, Bill sent out the link for his new vlog." Mike was already storming down the hall. He threw open Bill's office door without knocking. "Well, hello there," Bill said jovially. "What can I?" Mike cut him off by grabbing Bill's shirt and slamming him against the wall. "I saw your little video," he seethed through clenched teeth. "The one where you mocked and belittled the warehouse staff, your staff?" Bill, for the first time looking genuinely rattled, stammered excuses about it just being for laughs. Mike tightened his grip, staring him down furiously until Bill withered under his gaze. Disgusted, Mike shoved him aside and turned to leave. "This ends now," Mike said coldly. "I'm taking that video to the CEO. We'll see who's laughing then." Mike left Bill sputtering panicked threats and apologies. But his ruthless vengeance had been replaced by calm, controlled determination. There were some lines no man of honor could allow to be crossed, and Mike would make sure Bill finally paid for daring to do so. Chapter 11. In the week following the video revelation, a profound emotional change came over Mike. The hot rage that had fueled his drive for vengeance cooled into an icy, simmering fury. Bill had revealed himself to be not merely a two-faced schemer, but a bigoted bully who viewed the staff as objects for mockery. This petty tyrant did not deserve an honorable showdown between rivals. Mike would bring Bill's hate out into the disinfecting light, exposing his true rotten nature for all to see. The noble warrior had died. In his place stood a harbinger enacting a calculated scorched earth campaign against Bill's undeserved status. When Mike informed the warehouse crew about the video, their reaction confirmed the necessity of his new approach. The shock and hurt on their faces as they learned how Bill had mocked them cut Mike to his core. These good, hard-working men deserved better than to have their dignity stripped away by an egomaniac. "After all our years of service, this is how management sees us," one asked bitterly. "Performing monkeys for their amusement?" The angry rumblings grew as they shared their grievances and discussed over Bill's conduct. Mike had hoped to spare them pain, but realized that exposing Bill's ugliness was the only path to justice. The torch of righteousness in his hand must now also sear those who trusted him as a leader. At home, Mike's new attitude affected his marriage as well. His wife Cheryl had always held out hope that Mike's promotion meant a brighter future for their family. But Mike could no longer justify working one more day for a company that harbored and empowered someone like Bill. When Cheryl broke down crying after Mike described the nature of the video, he held her silently as she poured out pent-up years of fear and uncertainty about their stability. Mike's stoic calm smoothed over the churning emotions underneath. This was about righting wrongs now, no matter what it cost him. The day Mike walked into the CEO's office unannounced, he carried himself with icy purpose. The CEO's bemused expression faded as Mike described the harassment. Stone-faced, Mike slid the video over without a word. Later that day, Mike ignored the panicked voicemails from Bill pleading for mercy. His fate was sealed. Mike had been reborn. The reckoning was at hand. Chapter 12. In the weeks following Bill's termination, Mike grappled with the fallout of his decision as he found himself thrust into Bill's old managerial role. Though the staff celebrated Bill's removal, Mike took no pleasure in the victory. Exposing his misdeeds had been necessary, but left Mike feeling the entire office culture was tainted by complicity in Bill's prejudices. Mike now saw that for too long. He had played the same political games as Bill rather than standing firmly on principle. Well-meaning colleagues had encouraged Mike's vendetta, blind to the toxicity it brought out in him. Human dignity had been reduced to a bargaining chip. While the staff saw Mike as a hero, he struggled internally with the person he had become, seeking validation through retaliation rather than virtue. In fighting Bill by stooping to his level, Mike now saw they were two sides of the same coin, corrupted souls seeking status and power over earning respect. One sleepless night, Mike went down to the empty warehouse floor and sat alone amongst the silent machinery and shelves stretching into darkness. This was where he had spent a decade in honest, simple labor before promotion promises and office rivalries hollowed him out. He had lost himself. Seized by a sudden conviction, Mike called the CEO first thing in the morning and resigned his managerial post. The staff was shocked when he announced his intention to return to the warehouse permanently. "But why throw this all away now?" asked one bewildered colleague. "You won. The office job, the authority, it's everything you wanted." "Everything I thought I wanted," Mike corrected. "I've realized the petty politics of this office go against my principles. I don't want power gained through humiliation. It's time I get back to what matters, working with integrity." The nobility Mike had lost sight of felt restored as he donned his dusty blue jumpsuit once again. He had achieved justice, but corroded his own dignity in the process. Trading gossip and schemes for the camaraderie of his warehouse allies felt like a reunion with his soul. As Mike got back to work loading boxes alongside men who judged him by his character, not his status, he knew this is where he belonged. He was finally home. Chapter 13. Over the next year, working back on the warehouse floor, Mike continuously faced fallout from his time in the office. The messy conflicts he sparked did not disappear just because his own outlook had shifted. Soon after Mike's resignation as logistics manager, a facilities audit turned up a series of safety violations from the previous leadership tenure. Given the short time Mike served in the role, It was apparent these systemic issues came from Bill's time running the department. However, since Mike had technically been Bill's replacement, blame filtered down to him. Mike had to endure the drudgery of multiple oversight committee meetings, repeatedly explaining he had only been in charge briefly after Bill left. His word carried little weight. The legacy of Mike's scheme with Bill now hung like a dead weight around his neck. Rumors also spread questioning the ethics of how Bill had been ousted, since Mike refused to disclose specifics. He must have real dirt he's still sitting on, people whispered. Having tasted the addictive thrill of office politics, some suspected Mike now regretted relinquishing his station and was bitter. Mike learned the hard lesson that no good deed goes unpunished. The greatest agony came from seeing the rift his actions had caused between management and the warehouse staff. Empowered by Mike's brief solidarity in their uprising against Bill, the workers now demanded greater respect, ignoring Mike's pleas for moderation. After a heated dispute, several stormed out, costing the warehouse vital labor. Mike blamed himself for igniting class tensions that now burned out of control. Each new crisis drained Mike's spirit. He grew weary constantly explaining himself and fighting fires kindled long ago. There were no more schemes now, just the smoldering wreckage of past gambits coming back to haunt him. Mike wondered if returning to the warehouse had simply been running away from the consequences of his own schemes. But the only path now was forward, dutifully maintaining patience and virtue where he lacked power. His long night of the soul stretched on under the warehouse lights. Chapter 14. The ultimate crisis came a few months later, when a major inventory error threatened to shut down warehouse operations indefinitely. Mike arrived at work one day to find the warehouse floor flooded with misdelivered inventory and staff in a panic trying to sort through it all. As Mike scrambled to assess the scale of the disaster, the HR rep ran up to inform him corporate was sending auditors. It turned out someone had botched the entire inventory database, mixing up parts numbers and shipment addresses. Hours were spent just identifying the incorrect shipments already sent to customers. The backlog of unsorted inventory kept growing. As Mike desperately tried restoring order, it dawned on him that this system failure had Bill's fingerprints all over it. Mike recalled complaining previously that the outdated inventory software needed replacing. Bill must have decided to quietly corrupt the database on his way out, a parting middle finger to the warehouse team that had cheered his firing. Sure enough, the audit rapidly confirmed that the problems stemmed from compromised data inherited from the previous logistics regime. Mike's protests that had preceded his tenure fell on deaf ears. The CEO gave Mike an ultimatum: he fixed this crisis in a week, or the warehouse would be permanently shuttered. Mike rallied every able body, working night and day alongside the crew, frantically recounting and updating each inventory record manually. The effort took its toll, both physically and emotionally. Mike cursed himself for not having more regularly backed up the outdated system while he was manager. As the final hours ticked down, Mike saw the staff's spirits flagging. But closing the warehouse would devastate these workers who depended on each paycheck. Incensed by Bill's spiteful sabotage, Mike gave an impassioned speech urging them to keep fighting. Reinvigorated, they redoubled their efforts. With minutes to spare, Mike submitted the corrected inventory records to the auditors. Breathless, he awaited their verdict on the warehouse's fate. This time he knew no clever tricks could extend their deadline. Hard work and integrity alone would have to save them now. Chapter 15. In the end, the warehouse staff's exhaustive effort paid off. The auditors, though frustrated by the delays, could find no remaining inventory issues. Operations were allowed to continue under close supervision. The next week felt surreal as life slipped back into its routine cadence. Mike kept expecting the other shoe to drop. How had he avoided the utter professional ruin he deserved for the chaos his feuding with Bill caused? Unable to make sense of it, Mike arranged a meeting with the CEO to discuss the audit results. She seemed surprised by Mike's contrition. "The board knows you did everything possible to fix the situation," she said. "I'll admit it hasn't been a smooth transition since your predecessor left, but the problems clearly stemmed from his tenure." Her naive assurances gnawed at Mike. He had successfully contained the warehouse scandals without ever honestly accounting for his own role. Mike could probably spin his way into a clean exit now if he wanted. Nobody suspected his behind-the-scenes scheme had lit the fuse on the powder keg long ago. Mike looked inward for courage, then confessed the full truth: the rivalry with Bill, the sabotage, the calculated leaks. The CEO listened silently, eyebrows raised. Mike accepted her judgment, committed to facing the consequences with dignity. The CEO sighed heavily, then fixed Mike with a serious look. "I appreciate you being forthright," she said. "It certainly explains a lot, but dredging up the past won't help anyone move forward. You clearly know the difference now between right and wrong. That's what matters." Mike left the office in a daze. He had received grace, but not justice. Burdened by this disorienting mercy, Mike turned to the one group he knew would show him how to make amends: the warehouse staff. That weekend, Mike gathered everyone and came clean about his conduct. They deserved to know why he had stirred up trouble that rained down on them too. Mike vowed to spend every day proving he had learned from his mistakes. The workers' response surprised Mike. "Bill had it out for us from the start," one said. "You were just sticking up for your people, bygones be bygones." Their easy forgiveness only amplified Mike's shame. He didn't deserve such selfless mercy. But he resolved to live up to it, even if it took the rest of his days. A man could choose to stop running from his past. It was time to make peace and move forward. Chapter 16. In the year following his confession, Mike established a new normal: reporting to the warehouse each day with a sense of purpose and calm. He no longer angled for promotion or acclaim like before. The politics had drained out of him. Now he just wanted to do right as steady and reliable like old machinery. Mike volunteered for the most tedious and thankless tasks in order to make life easier for everyone else. He operated with diligent precision, but no longer with bitter ambition. At the end of each shift, Mike felt the satisfaction of an honest day's work done. Outside of work, Mike's new outlook healed old wounds. He embraced routine moments with Cheryl rather than talking restlessly about the future. They planned simple weekend trips and dates again like the old days. Mike reconciled with his 3 siblings as well, whom he had become distant from over the years. His family didn't understand Mike's warehouse calling, but they respected his quiet contentment. Even when the yearly promotions were announced, Mike happily congratulated colleagues advancing ahead of him. He encouraged those moving up like he once had wished to. The only lingering ache came whenever Mike reflected on Bill. He prayed for the twisted soul who had turned cruelty into a sport and made so many suffer. It pained Mike knowing that man's sickness might continue spreading its contagion undiscovered. But when resentment crept back in, Mike caught himself. He had been freed of vengeance's grip. Falling back into that abyss would only lead to darker places. Justice now meant protecting others from harm, not plotting it. On the anniversary of his confession, Mike again gathered everyone, only this time to ask their forgiveness. The warehouse floor fell silent aside from a few sniffles as the men embraced Mike. He had finally found grace for himself, not through punishment, but by choosing dignity over bitterness. This was Mike's home now until the end. Chapter 17. The years stretched on as Mike settled into his role as a stalwart warehouse worker. The wild ambition that had once consumed him faded into distant memory. Now he was just happy to complete each task at hand and enjoy his colleagues' company. Mike's reliable diligence made him beloved by the newer workers he helped train. They depended on his insights to navigate the vast inventory systems he knew like the back of his hand. Mike was always ready with an encouraging word or helpful tip for anyone struggling. "I don't know how we'd keep this place running without you," the new manager often told Mike gratefully. She had taken over after the turmoil of recent years and saw Mike as a stabilizing mentor for the staff. Mike politely deflected praise. "Just being useful is thanks enough for me," he'd reply. The shy contentment on his aged face spoke of inner peace rediscovered. At home, Mike's renewed devotion showed in small, thoughtful gestures, taking over chores when Cheryl was tired, surprising her with flowers, trading massages after long days. A gentle affection had returned to the relationship. The storm clouds of the past dissipated. Mike's transformed persona proved redemptive for his siblings as well. His patient listening settled old feuds and brought understanding where resentment had festered. He offered advice to his brothers navigating careers, pressing them to uphold virtue. On the warehouse floor each day, Mike gave his all not for advancement, but simply because it was right. He clocked in dutifully at sunrise, laboring until satisfied each task was done to perfection. Then he clocked out at sunset, ready to rest until tomorrow brought new purpose. Mike's fiery ambition had long since cooled to reveal bedrock decency underneath. He was anchored now, a content in all weathers, come what storms may. The winds had shaped him into a beacon marking the way back home. Chapter 18. One winter day, Mike's supervisor called him up to the office, a rare summons after so many years left alone to his warehouse duties. Apprehensively, Mike made the familiar walk down the hallways past desks and conference rooms to the executive wing. He realized how out of place his dusty boots and creased jumpsuit looked amid the sleek business attire. The supervisor gestured for Mike to sit. "After a decade back here with us, we wanted to discuss your plans for the future." Mike blinked in surprise. The future? He had been living comfortably in the present without ambition for so long. "Your years of service since returning to the warehouse have been exemplary," she continued. "Which is why leadership wanted me to again extend the offer of a promotion to the logistics group, or even department lead if you prefer to stay close to your team." The words washed over Mike without sparking any emotion. A chance to regain status in the office ranks, to claim managerial authority, once the holy grail of Mike's aspirations. Now the offer slid past like a silent ghost, unable to grip him. "I'm touched you still see potential in me to contribute at that level," Mike said slowly. "But I gave up seeking prestige long ago. My place is with the good folks out on the warehouse floor now. They keep me feeling young." His supervisor nodded, unsurprised, and smiled. "I had a hunch you'd say as much. We just wanted to make the offer out of respect for all you've done here over the years. You've got a home with us as long as you want it." Mike politely shook his outstretched hand. But as he left the office, an odd melancholy came over him. He wondered suddenly about the man he could have been, successful, proud, wearing sharp suits instead of dusty denim. A ghost from his past beckoned from the direction of what might have been. When he shared the offer with Cheryl that night, she assured him no role mattered more than being the steadfast husband she loved. "You chose what's true," she said simply. Mike knew then he had no more dreams to discover at the office. His place was here with her. The next morning, Mike stopped by the supervisor's desk on his way to the warehouse floor. "After all this time, turns out I'm right where I ought to be," he said. Nodding farewell, Mike got to work. He was home. Chapter 19. As Mike settled back into the comforting routine of the warehouse after declining promotion, he pondered what ambitions still stirred in him after so many years. What did his heart still yearn for? Mike realized that more than acclaim or status, what motivated him now was passing on wisdom so that others avoided his mistakes. He hoped to spare promising young staff from stumbling down wayward paths in pursuit of validation. So Mike made an effort to mentor up-and-comers on preserving their principles and not losing themselves to bitterness. He shared candid lessons from his moral detours in the office politics. One young protoge named Derek reminded Mike of himself, talented but insecure, hungry to prove himself. Mike took him aside after a frustrated outburst. "The climb upwards tests our patience and character," Mike counseled. "Don't sacrifice who you are just to reach the heights a bit faster. We need good men up top." With staff, Mike stressed putting team needs first, rather than stepping on others while climbing. And he warned against seeing management as adversaries, but partners in shared success. "If you keep your hands clean and your heart true, you'll get where you ought to be," Mike often advised. At home, Mike sought to pass Cheryl's wisdom onto his grown nieces and nephews whenever they visited. He urged them to embrace family as their anchor during stormy times. "The world will drag you every which way if you let it," Mike warned them. "But love and kindness are the lighthouse bringing you safely home. Always let that light guide you." Mike knew his days left were shorter than the road behind. But by planting seeds of virtue in fertile minds, he hoped his hard-won experience might brighten the path for the next generation. After a lifetime of searching externally for purpose, Mike now found it through his quiet devotion to shepherding others. He tended his small corner of the world patiently, trusting ripples from each good act would extend farther than he could foresee. Chapter 20. On the last day of Mike's 30-year career with the company, the warehouse staff held a celebration in his honor. As Mike looked out over the assembled crowd of colleagues, he pondered what lessons from his circuitous journey might inspire those left to carry on. When Mike stood to address them, he spoke from the heart. "Early on, I was convinced my value came from the status and prestige of my job title," Mike confessed. "I was willing to compromise my principles chasing after positions of power in the office upstairs." The crowd shifted uncomfortably at this acknowledgement of Mike's flaws, but he pressed on unflinchingly. "Even after I saw the corruption in that pursuit, anger and bitterness kept me focused on bringing down those I saw as enemies. I became a pawn in the petty politics, stooping to the level of those I resented. In the process, I lost sight of our shared dignity." Faces around the room nodded, appreciating the wisdom forged through Mike's trials. "But the most powerful thing I've learned," Mike continued, "is that we degrade ourselves when we seek justice through vengeance rather than virtue. True justice uplifts us all. It restores human dignity lost rather than destroying that of our opponent, however wrong they may have been." Mike surveyed the rapt crowd. "We choose whether to be proud, yet forgiving in responding to wrongs. That is the test of moral courage, resisting righteous vengeance for a greater purpose. Each of us here has passed that test before. The men beamed with solidarity and appreciation of Mike's hard-fought perspective. Mike raised a glass. So I leave you with this wisdom, and my faith in your abilities to live it. Building others up with integrity and compassion makes us victors. But trying to elevate ourselves by degrading anyone, even our enemies, only reveals our own deficiency. The crowd erupted in heartfelt cheers and applause for Mike's humble but powerful message. He left them with his head held high, hoping his imperfect life could help perfect those to come. Chapter 21. Reflecting back on his time at the company through retirement, Mike was struck by the magnitude of change that overcame his character through successive trials. His blinkered younger self would scarcely recognize the man he had become. In the beginning, Mike's entire sense of worth and goodness came externally, from titles, pay rates, and pecking order. He was willing to do anything in pursuit of promotion that would feed his ego and status. Ruthlessly political, Mike saw colleagues as competition and stewed obsessively over rivals like Bill. Work was just a means to an end, a system to be gamed by the cunning and ambitious. But after Mike's demotion and moral failures pursuing vengeance, his character became purified, shifting from bitter and calculating to humility and service. Mike had to hit rock bottom, surrendering the last clinging shreds of corrupt ambition before being able to rediscover virtue. Only then could he ascend the heights of wisdom, gazing calmly at the machinations others still wasted energy on. In the process, Mike transformed from a rigid tactician into a stoic mentor, a leading through patience and principle rather than demands. He learned to separate human worth and dignity from fleeting roles. This revelation enabled Mike to stabilize his home life as well. By embracing imperfection and change rather than demanding rigid ideals, Mike rediscovered graceful love with Cheryl that elevated them both. In the end, Mike measured success by the positive impact he left on those around him, not by promotions or acclaim. His humble devotion rippled out, silently shaping countless lives through his steady example over the years. Mike's earlier competitive drive mellowed into an earnest calling to serve others before himself. He found fulfillment in order and purpose, rather than chaos and politics. By repeatedly shedding ambition and rancor to find moral clarity over decades, Mike was reborn into wisdom worthy of the gray in his close-cropped hair. The true victories he came to understand require no vanquished, only virtue. And a life thus devoted could not help but leave the world better for its brief flicker across time's endless night. Chapter 22. On the evening after Mike's retirement party, he met up with several former colleagues at a local pub to continue reminiscing. Each one shared how profoundly Mike's character evolution had impacted them. "I still remember looking up to you even during the office feuds," one admitted. "But your honesty and humility these past years taught me what real leadership looks like." Another explained, "When you came back to the floor, I braced for power struggles, but you put us at ease, like a tide lowering to let everyone rise." As they continued opening up, Mike was struck by how his imperfect journey had touched each life. One young manager confessed Mike's transparency about past wrongs helped him resist corruption. "I saw myself in your story. It inspired me to stay true and care for my people, not play games." An older worker told Mike, "Your patience and care for me struggling felt like grace. Made me change how I see young bloods. We all got growing left to do." The most touching testimony came from Derek, the once ambitious Mike mentored. "Your advice put me on a better path," Derek said. Pushing my pride aside, let me appreciate the team and what matters. I owe you. Mike was moved beyond words, eyes glistening. Amid chants of hear from his compatriots, Mike stood humbly. My ups and downs have been a cautionary tale for some, an inspiration for others, Mike acknowledged. But your generosity of spirit in response is what has always lifted me higher. Raising a glass, Mike toasted, "To each of you, your goodness redeemed this old fool. Here's to wisdom. May we never think we have it all to gain." Mike now saw that over years of quiet deeds, he had traced a roadmap of redemption for fellow travelers. His greatest legacy was showing that out of darkness, moral courage could ignite hearts to light the way forward together. The end.